And it sounds focusing on people, striving for peace and decent life for all on a sustainable planet. So, as you can see, the peace features quite prominently among the priorities of my presidency, and I'm glad that we are here to discuss peace. But speaking about peace, we have to be frank and we have to admit that we are not where we wanted to be. We are not living up to the commitments made by our predecessors when drafting the Charter of the United Nations, wrote in the very first sentence, to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war. So we are far from that, but we can get there. The question is how to do it. And to help us facilitate the discussion about how to achieve peace that can be sustained, I would like to focus on 3 points. The first, I want to talk about sustaining peace. Sustaining peace is a real peace. Is a positive peace. Is a peace that goes beyond just the absence of war. Is the peace that can resist tests and tremors. Is a peace that is not measured in weeks or months, but rather in years or in generations. This is the kind of peace that the drafters of the United Nations Charter dreamed of. And this is the kind of peace that should be the norm and not the exception for people today. And this is the kind of peace that the United Nations should be known for helping to achieve throughout the world. And we do have the tools to make this peace a reality. And here I want to refer to what the President Jan Eliasson already mentioned. In April 2016, the United Nations General Assembly and the Security Council together adopted twin resolutions on sustaining peace. These resolutions called on us all to do more to achieve this kind of peace. And since then, the phrase sustaining peace has become very well known in the United Nations system. It has spurred new initiatives, and it has got us all talking and acting. And 2 weeks ago, this idea of sustaining peace brought a big crowd to New York for what we call the high-level meeting on peace building and sustaining peace that I organized. It was planned for 2 days, but we had so many participants and so high interest in the discussions. More than 130 member states wanted to take the floor and speak about peace that we spilled over into a third day. And with all the modesty, I believe that we managed to achieve at least 3 goals with organizing this event. First, we gave much greater visibility and prominence to the issue of sustaining peace. This was the highest level crowd, highest number of VIPs in New York since the general debate in September. Spent days talking about peace. We had 6 heads of states and governments, more than 30 ministers, deputy ministers. We had a number of peace activists from the ground, civil society leaders, peacemakers, and they all discussed peace. We had 18 side events on the margins of the main event, so we really managed to raise visibility around this crucial concept. Second goal that we aspired to meet, and we managed to do so, was to turn the sustaining peace from a once-off event or once-off adoption of resolution into a permanent process. And we succeeded because we had again adopted resolutions, the similar resolution in the General Assembly and in the Security Council, making sure that this issue will be on the agenda of the United Nations next year, 2 years from now, that the Secretary General was requested to deliver a new report. That means we will have a regular assessment of how we do in promoting the idea of sustaining peace, and this has become part of the General Assembly's regular agenda. And third, we learned a lot of new things, because we listened to the speakers, we listened to those who are working on the ground with real people doing real work. Now, my team and myself are facing a challenge of turning these maybe 50 pages of interesting ideas into a short, concise document which is called the Chair Summary that I will be distributing in coming days. But I want to use this opportunity and to share with you some of the key takeaways from the discussion, and this will be my second point. So what were the key issues that were mentioned by the speakers at the Sustaining Peace high-level event? Well, first we heard that we are doing a good work, but we are not always doing it together. We are not always checking in and coordinating. And we are not always seeing the bigger picture or the common goals we are all aiming for. And that's why we heard very loud calls for more coherence and more coordination. The high-level meeting showcased some best practices, and we learned about how we are moving from standalone actors or activities for peace to pooling our assets. And there are already very good examples, and I've seen one myself when I visited Colombia recently, and in a provincial city of Totoro, I saw the work on implementing the peace deal, and I saw the United Nations agencies, the government officials, and indigenous communities working all together under the United Nations interagency program and working towards a common goal to make the peace agreement stick. That was really encouraging. The second very important issue that was mentioned often by the speakers were the partnerships. Years ago, the United Nations was like an island, and too often it acted alone. But now we have all realized that sustaining peace cannot be owned by any one entity. It can only be achieved if we all work together. We heard during the meeting that partnerships with regional organizations are particularly crucial. And given where we are today and the theme of this topic, I think this is also a good opportunity to talk about partnerships between the United Nations and regional organizations, for example, between the European Union and the United Nations for sustaining peace. And thirdly, and I want to say this clearly and proudly, not one discussion failed to have a gender dimension. Not one. And my question to you, if we had convened this high-level meeting like 10 years ago, do we think that we would see the same case? Most likely not. So it's a positive thing that we did have made some gains towards truly inclusive peace building. And Foreign Minister Wallström was very clear on this. She was clear this morning, but she was also clear 2 weeks ago in New York when she asked, how can we expect to achieve sustaining peace if we leave out half of the population? So it's good that it is clearly acknowledged and recognized, but this is definitely not a room for complacency, because it does not matter what we say in the high-level meetings if women are still being excluded on the ground. So I have to say that stories that we heard show that we still have a lot of work left to do. One good place to start would be a more gender-sensitive conflict analysis. And I also want to refer to young people, because they make up another important part of society which has previously been marginalized from our work for peace. Now, however, we know that we cannot move forward without them. And at the meeting we heard inspiring stories about what the young people are doing on the ground, and we heard from young people themselves. And they made a very consistent request to be given more space at the table. Don't talk about young people, invite young people, let them talk and listen to what they have to say. A fourth main theme at the high-level meeting was financing. And the discussions here were very pragmatic. They acknowledged something important, namely, even if we do everything else, the partnerships, the coherence, the inclusion, we still cannot achieve our vision of sustaining peace without adequate financing. And our meeting also showed that there is, in fact, a lot of interest from investors. We heard from traditional donors as well as from new and potential ones. But business representatives made a very strong point that they cannot be just seen as cash cows. We must therefore think about how to fully engage them in reciprocal partnerships for sustaining peace. So these are, I would say, the key takeaways. This is definitely not the full rundown of the meeting. I do not have enough time for that, but I hope I managed to raise some key issues that are very relevant to the discussions that are going to take place also here in this forum later today and tomorrow. But there is something crucial which I have not yet mentioned and which was a central theme to the high-level meeting, and that is the conflict prevention. So let me focus on it as my final point here. And it is really very simple. We need to prevent. There is no excuse and there is no other way. We are losing too many lives. Conflict, and I'm sure you agree with me, is the worst thing that can happen to a human being. And yet, for too many, it's part of their everyday. And so there is a very strong moral case, which we cannot ignore. But there is also a financial case for conflict prevention, because now we know that we are also losing too much money due to conflicts. And the recent World Bank United Nations study, Pathways for Peace, which was already mentioned here, and I'm glad to see the author of the study among us this morning, proves this beyond any doubt. And I will repeat the figure here that I used at the opening of the high-level event. For every $1 spent on prevention, up to $7 could be saved over the long term. As the discussion showed, the prevention takes many forms. It must tackle conflicts at its roots before it can spread. And this means stronger institutions. It means smart and sustainable development. It means inclusive peace building. It means promoting human rights and the rule of law. And this is something that came out strongly out of the meeting. But prevention, as we all know, is also political. And I want to focus on mediation and diplomacy, because I think this is what speaks directly to the theme of today's meeting, the politics of peace. Peace can be and is political. Peace can be very complicated, and it can be also messy. Mediators do not have an easy job, because they must understand the history of a conflict and the mentality of people fighting in it. They must learn how to expect the unexpected. They must be accepted by all parties and put forward a team that gains acceptance too. And they often must shelve their own politics and preferences for the overarching goal of peace. These are the realities. And they are the realities the international community needs to face if we want to play a bigger role in preventing conflicts. In many cases, we need to find a right balance, remaining neutral, but not pretending that politics does not exist, ensuring local ownership, but working for international support, holding onto our values, but not automatically excluding those who do not share them, and aiming for an ideal, but being able to adapt when less than ideal things happen, and they do happen. So, Excellencies, dear colleagues, let me conclude by thanking the Stockholm's International Peace Research Institute, SIPRI, and the Swedish Ministry for Foreign Affairs for bringing us here today. And like I said, we are not where we wanted to be, but this does not mean we cannot get there. Let's make sure that we are heading in the right direction. And we need to use forums like this one to put our heads together and to think and talk about how we can get there even faster. Thank you very much, and good luck with the discussions.